So let's talk about apologies then. Your apology, CT, has been heard. Shall be taken into advisement. We shall consider it.
For purpose of this discussion, stop calling me CT.
Charles.
Yes, right.
Charles the Third.
Charles.
This is Charles the first of his name, is in the studio, and we are joined by Cornelius Oduor. Cornelius is the Deputy Executive Director at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. The Kenya Human Rights Commission had a press conference on Sunday when they were saying, you know what, Sawa, we are going to get a few visitors in the country. Mgeni siku ya kwanza. No. In this particular case, mgeni kabla afike, tunamwambia kuja na apology.
Agenda 1.
Agenda number 1. Kuja na apology. Now he'll be telling us. So the King and Queen are already in the country. They arrived last night. They are beginning their programs. Already the King is meant to be meeting with President William Ruto this morning. The Queen as well is meeting with the First Lady, Mama Rachel Ruto, again this morning. So this and the other. So Cornelius, karibu. You'll tell us what the Kenya Human Rights Commission is all up against. No, not against, but, with the conversation that you're raising. But CT has the day's proverb.
I do.
And the proverb is from the Republic of?
Burundi.
All right.
Yes, you cannot hide the smoke of the heart you set on fire. Heart is H-U-T. However, I've been informed that it can be H-A-T, it can be H-E-A-R-T.
Or H-U-R-T.
Or H-U-R-T.
Whichever heart is hot, you light the fire. All right.
That.
Yes.
You cannot ignore
the smoke
of
of
the heart you set on fire.
yes. Heart, you fire set.
Cornelius, what do you understand from this proverb? What's your interpretation of it?
It's a difficult one. But there are things you can't hide. I think, obviously, a smoke, it's very difficult to control it. It will get out from any direction. Yeah. So there are things that once you've done, they'll come out, definitely.
Upendo zipende.
And to spend.
You have to deal with them.
Yes.
You have to know that, you have to own up to the fact that you're the one who lit that fire. And then you have got to deal with the consequences, whether you want to put out the fire or you want to let the heart burn.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So take us through what the press briefing was about on Sunday. Over the weekend, the Kenya Human Rights Commission called the media and they said, we have something that we'd like to send a message to the visiting King Charles III and Queen Camilla as they come to the country and the entire government of Britain. We'd like you to remember one or two things. What are those things?
Yeah, of course, it's a great opportunity for the visit. And as a human rights organization, we saw an opportunity to speak to the king now that he was coming to visit us. And we thought that the agendas were all good, but there was one thing that we were very, 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 very specific on, that this was the right time for the king to make an official apology to Kenyans. And that's all we are saying, that as a human rights organization, it's within our responsibility to bring out the violations that were committed and seek for remedy in form of an apology. So I think we're just within our scope and mandate to ask for what is genuinely Kenyans deserve, to get a public apology from the king.
Are you seeking a blanket apology or are you seeking an apology for specific events? Which is which?
Of course, there are several things that happened. Of course, the atrocities that were committed during the colonial time. You remember quite a number of people died. The epitome of this being the emergency between 1952 and 1960. It's a record that over 100,000 people died. There's never been an apology on this matter. If anything, we've only had statements of regret, and we felt that as part of the UN guiding principles on the framework for reparation, a public apology will suffice for this case.
Okay. What would an apology do? Let's look at what happened, really, when Kenya was made a colony of Great Britain, right? Those very, very many years ago. We know of some of the atrocities that we cannot downplay or underplay. We know what many would say is happening in the country today as a direct result of some of the action that was taken by Great Britain. This is just for Kenya. We're not even talking about other nations, right? We talk about systems that were then enshrined as a result of colonialism. And as Kenya being a colony of Great Britain, we know certain things that happened, whether you're looking at an education system, whether you're looking at a judicial system, whether you're looking at a system of government, etc., etc. And some of those things are deep-seated, deep-rooted. We talked about total assimilation of Kenya under colonial rule by Great Britain. What would an apology do? What would it unearth that has been so deeply enshrined? Some of the atrocities that some people will not forget for generations. So the third time, what would an apology do?
I think it's part of the reparation framework first to acknowledge that violations were committed. It's a very important step in terms of reconciliation and having the necessary, what I call it, laying the framework for even doing other things that will seek to bring the situation back to the situation as it were to originally where Kenyans were before the colonial misrule. So what we are saying is that it's a first statement of acknowledging, and then there are other things that will follow, like coming up with the reparative frameworks that can address the plight of people who still feel up to date, still have impact of these atrocities. Yeah. So we consider it as a very important fundamental step in addressing a number of issues that we'll be raising shortly.
Would an apology that came, even though it was not felt by the apology giver, make a difference? So if somebody apologized because there was pressure.
Some are sorry.
Okay, sorry. All right. If somebody apologized because there was pressure, what would the difference be between that apology and one that was truly felt? If an apology came because, would it make it better? Would it make impact? Would it make change?
So are you saying that we are putting pressure?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm asking if Great Britain said, okay, you know what, these fellas have been asking for an apology for years. Let's just give them the apology and let's move on. Would it make a difference if it's that the stance? Because you would be able to tell, really, if somebody really did apologize to you from the heart, apologize to a country for the things they did. When we are not running away from that. But then I feel if they wanted to, if they felt sorry, they would have apologized by now. So what if an apology comes, but it's not felt? Would it make a difference in this demand we're making for an apology?
Of course, it should make a difference because previously there have been attempts to apologize, but that was also through coercion as a result of the Mau Mau
attempts
case.
To apologize or attempts to have them apologize?
Attempts to actually there was a regret statement that was
to acknowledge.
To acknowledge.
This, but in the standards that we all abide by is that this should come out in form of a public apology. And that's what we are saying, that with the visit of the King is a great opportune time to make this apology in a way that will be meet the expectations of the victims of the Kenyan public to date. So I'm trying to understand whether they're saying that the apology is not significant or it will not achieve anything, it will not change anything.
Let me ask this question. Beyond the words, would it help in any way if the apology was accompanied by a certain large sum of money?
Of course, money can be a factor, but then what you are talking about is programs that can help address some of those issues.
Reparations is what the term they tend to use.
Yes.
You see, the reason why I asked this question, we have a precedent on this continent. In 1904, the previous century, 1908, the Germans committed atrocities in Namibia against the Herero and the Nam. Now, those atrocities, if you compare them with the atrocities committed by the British forces, the English phrase, it pales into insignificance. They were horrific, terrible things. The Germans apologized. They didn't say, we regret. Clear, we are very sorry, we did this and we are wrong. The German, that's 14th August 2004, German Minister for Economic Development, person with a very long name that I can't actually pronounce, is the one, it ends with Zul, Z-E-U-L. But beyond that, they also promised to give these two communities reparation to the tune of 1.8 billion euros spread over 30 years to help in the development. Okay? But they apologized. When people talk of apologies, they normally say if you apologize, there's legal ramification. We spoke to the British High Commission and said, yes, there are legal ramifications. Now, do you know what these ramifications would be if, say, His Majesty apologized and said, look, guys, sorry, apology complete? Would there be legal consequences that may not necessarily be to the liking of Her Majesty's government?
His.
Her was mother.
Yes.
Recently deceased.
Yes.
Sorry.
His namesake.
His Majesty's government. Yes.
He is you.
Yeah, the fact that they are aware that an apology will come with some consequences also connotes the fact that there's no general acceptance, out of goodwill, because it's like you don't want to accept because there will be some repercussions. And therefore, then the dishonesty, that's where there lies the dishonesty, that you must own this thing in totality. You don't need to own it to the extent that it doesn't affect you.
Okay.
Yeah.
When somebody says, I'm sorry, if we look at the meaning, it actually means you've said that you were wrong and that this thing, if having given the opportunity, you would not do it. You would not repeat it. Yeah. And I think we're on the assumption that Great Britain or any other one who colonized another nation is actually sorry for the things that they did. Is that an assumption that we are on? Maybe they actually are not. Maybe they're all right with the things that they did.
Hence the push to get them sorry.
Yeah. Well, but if somebody doesn't actually see anything wrong with what they did, and maybe if given an opportunity, they do it 10 times over. And now here we are saying, apologize for what you did, and maybe they see absolutely nothing wrong with what they did. Is that something that we'd be willing to come to terms with?
Okay, during the time they did this in the colonial era, the interest might have been different.
Yeah.
But now with the new world and the new framework and understanding, it's behoves them to do this, because now it's very clear, according to the United Nations frameworks, that atrocities were committed. And there's a framework for reparation, one of which is to publicly apologize and to ensure that this kind of thing does not happen again. So you will see that even in this visit, there are attempts to deal with some of these issues. Visit at the Uhuru Gardens. It signifies that they also feel that they are obligated to speak to some of these things. But the way we want it to come out is what I think probably is raising concerns. We want a public apology, but they feel that they can make with some of these statements that fell short or fall short of an apology.
I want to piggyback on what Ndu is asking. I mean, what difference would it make? So far, the British government has acknowledged the role it played during the colonial period, and they have expressed deep regret. I regret doing the things that I did. It's an acknowledgement and a regret. Okay? They only fell short of saying apology because apology opens up that legal loophole. What's the difference? What difference would it make if they went further to say, we apologize? Is it only the money, or is there anything else? Because so far they have publicly said, we acknowledge what we did and we deeply regret what we did. The visit by the king is also acknowledging what happened among the activities that are scheduled as symbolic to show that we are acknowledging, we are not running away from the fact that there's something that we did when we were in this country. And that's why he's coming. That's why he's going to unveil that tomb of the unknown warrior. It's acknowledging that there's something that we did. And we have publicly said we deeply regret what we did. So what would the word sorry change, if not only for money?
Are we asking for too much?
I don't know. Are you asking for money? That's the question.
We're not asking for money.
So what is it? What difference would sorry and I deeply regret what I did mean?
What I am asking again is, if I deeply regret, am I not apologetic? That's really the question. I deeply regret what I have
If
done.
I acknowledge what I've wronged you, and I tell you, Enye, I deeply regret what I've done.
Are you not expressing sorrow? Is that not sorry?
Is there a situation you can express your regret and fail to apologize?
I've apologized, just that I'm not getting into the legal.
Actually, it is an
loophole.
apology.
Yes.
Think of, say, our native languages. Yeah? When people apologize, do they say I apologize or do they acknowledge that they have wronged you? Just think.
How do you say sorry in Luo?
That is where I'm going.
How do you
yes,
apologize?
Yes.
Is there a word?
You acknowledge you're wrong.
Not sorry.
I have wronged you. And you can say, forgive me. So are you asking them to say, forgive me or forgive us? Because, as you say, if we expect the verbalizing of the word, I am sorry, I have wronged you.
What do we do?
Should it be followed by, I wronged you, I regret it, please forgive me for the wrong I have caused you? Would you be apologizing?
By and large, to some extent, you'll be apologizing. But in the context of what we are talking about, it's important that that apology is done in public in a way that conforms with the standards that are there. You'll agree with me that the effects of colonial atrocities are still with us. And it's very important that beyond the public apology, there are steps that should be taken to address some of these things. We still see them in many forms.
Okay.
And therefore, this public apology also comes with a package of so many things that we expect the British government to consider doing in
What are
the
some of
country.
those?
Of course, talking about the reparation framework and the issues that they need to do to address some of the challenges that come with the land injustices that we can trace back to the colonial times. The communities that are still feeling the pain of their community leaders, warriors, heroes, whose remains are yet to be traced to date. Even the remains of Dedan Kimathi, nobody knows. So it's the British people who did this, and probably they can help to solve some of these issues.
Indeed.
Some of these people were beheaded, and the parts of them were taken to the UK. We still have a lot of materials concerning the atrocities committed that are still, you can only still find in the British libraries. We want all these things brought back so that they can properly be kept in Kenya's museums as part of the reparation framework.
You know, in Holland, there is a research institute, it's called Historical Research Institute, that conducted a 4-year research. Now, the culmination of that research was they overturned a longly held view by the Dutch that actually the Dutch troops in Indonesia, were just fighting a war. We talk about the War of Independence, and that's all they were doing. But the research contradicted all this. What the research found was that the Dutch military systematically abused civilians, raped civilians, used excessive force. So in 2022, February 17, 2022, their prime minister, a gentleman by the name of Mark Rutte, and their king, the Dutch have a king, Willem Alexander, apologized to the Indonesians. And not only did they apologize for the atrocities, they also apologized for the lack of accepting and acknowledging the wrongs that previous Dutch governments had, because they had been denying it. They apologized for the wrong committed in the 40s. They also apologized for what the previous governments had not apologized. And he said, I apologize, the exact words, to the people of Indonesia. He added the words. Now, is that what you're looking for?
Yes, surely. It has been done. Even our former president did apologize. The AG did apologize. So why is it so difficult for the king not to apologize?
What followed this apology, City?
As in?
What did it come with?
What did it come with?
Yes.
Discussions as to what reparation would be adequate.
Okay.
You see,
so is the word sorry then the one that opens the door for the discussions?
It doesn't have to.
Or can these conversations happen without the word sorry? Can deep regret also open the door?
It can. The thing is this. the deep regret has to be accepted by the person you are proffering regret to. If they feel that the word regret doesn't do me good,
I want sorry.
I want to hear sorry, and I want to hear I apologize. And then I want you to itemize the things you did wrong to me, one by one by one. So I know you've actually acknowledged what it is you've done wrong. Now, I'm giving the example of the Dutch because they went further and apologized, as I said, for the denial of other previous governments. Said even this previous government didn't acknowledge this. The wrongs had been committed. Now, again, they came out. That was in 2022. That's last year. How long did it take for them to get to that point? But they got to that point. Now, is this what we are saying we need? Because I am saying the Mau Mau have had cases against the colonial government. There have been reparations. That story hasn't ended. There's a back and forth. This happened, so and so. It's a long story, and not the discussion for today. The apology, if His Majesty apologizes, let me ask the question that Eric already asked, what will it achieve? His Majesty stands up and says, I'm
sorry.
His Royal Majesty, the King of Great Britain and the Commonwealth, and he will use all his names. Okay, it's not just Charles. He's Charles and many other things. Says, I apologize to the people of Kenya for, then says, ta, 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 ta. And I apologize for previous governments that did not acknowledge the wrong that you had done. Okay, he has apologized. And Mrs. King, who is next to me here.
She's actually called the Queen, but okay.
Yes, okay. Also acknowledges and apologizes. We are apologizing because we are one entity. Okay, now what will you have achieved with that?
Of course, because now the victims are represented. That is, now you talk about the Mau Mau people, you talk about the Nandi community. These people are here. Why is it so difficult for them to have an audience and receive this apology in the format that they also feel that somebody has talked to them instead of issuing a statement in the UK Parliament?
Let's take a break.
Yes.
27 minutes to 9. We are hosting Cornelius Oduor. He is the Deputy Executive Director at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. This is an old commission. How many years is it now? 40?
30.
30?
Yeah, we are saluting at 30.
Yeah. The Kenya Human Rights Commission is at the forefront in advocating for human rights in the country. And they are saying, well, the King Charles III and Queen Camilla are in the country. They'll be doing a number of things, among them deepening their understanding of what was committed by those who are the colonial leaders in this country. But the human rights campaigners are saying, no. We want an apology. Not just an acknowledgement, but we want an apology. We want to understand, what does this apology mean? Give it here. Spice. Commission. The King and Queen are in the country. They're due to meet with the President and the First Lady shortly this morning, at the beginning of their 4-day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yes, 4-day visit to Nairobi, state visit. And the Kenya Human Rights Commission is saying what we want from the King is nothing short of an apology for what happened in the colonial days. As Siti and Du are asking, what specifics are these that we are seeking? Do you have a list of saying, so, number one, apologize. Once you apologize, two, now show us where Dedan Kimathi is, bring Orkoyot, show us this and the other. Is there a list of the things that you want as part of the reparations and everything that comes with the apology? Or are we just saying apologize and then we shall now figure out what else we want?
Of course, when you look at one of the things that we're recommending, apart from the unconditional public apology, we are seeking for support in documentation and bringing back the repository of all the things that the British took away from Kenya. It's very important as part of documentation for all these atrocities, which is currently lacking because of most of these things were taken and kept safely in British. We've seen this even recently in the DRC when some parts of late Patrick Lumumba was brought back. These are the kind of things we are talking about. Apart from that, reparation of victims is something that must be looked at. Of course, because of the Mau Mau out-of-court settlement with the British, it's only a small section of people who are compensated. But as you know, the list is wide, and there are people who still feel they were not represented in this case. So that also opens up an opportunity for a comprehensive discussion and a possible compensation framework.
Do you know how many people are not represented or were not represented?
What we know is that the Momo case only represented around 5,000 people. But these are the only people who fought.
How many?
Who were affected?
How many should be in that list?
I think, without necessarily giving the number, we need to widen the scope, because we strongly feel there are quite a large section of people who are affected.
You see, this is my problem, Cornelius.
Yes.
That we seem not to have our list of demands crystallized. What we want is the word sorry from King Charles, and then thereafter we don't know what to do with it. If we are seeking an apology so that we then move in towards getting proper justice for what happened in Kenya, then we need to have that list. Are we seeking an apology and then we say, now from the first time when we had this Crown Land Act, apologize for that, and let's... If we don't have all these things aligned, what are we seeking an apology for?
Or is it possible to seek some of these things then without this apology? Because these fellas have just about told you that they're not going to apologize. Number one, they've said, look, if we tell you, if we actually utter the words "I'm sorry," what this does is that it opens a whole can of worms that they're not ready to deal with legally. Because can you imagine the countries of the Commonwealth who will say, you apologize to Kenya? Okay. Even you must do it here and here and here. They're not ready to deal with that legal thing. So they've more or less said, well, you know what? An apology doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I think in the back of our heads, we know, right? This apology is long. It's not, it's
unless we push them to add
yeah.
it.
So is it possible then for this list of things that we're hoping up an apology will bring about, can we jump to the list of things and now start demanding some of these things? Because they've acknowledged at some point that yes, they were responsible for it. Is there a mechanism, for example, that would be in place to say, now let us start demanding some of these things? Because is it necessary for somebody to tell you sorry before we know that they did it? We know, for example, the reparations are being chased after. Can we not continue chasing after them? We know that we're looking for a return of certain things. I know in Nigeria we're looking for return of quite a number of things that the British took away from Nigeria. Do we have to wait for you to say sorry before we come after you for them? We're also looking to say, tell us where certain things are that would be important to us for our history. The remains of Dedan Kimathi, for example. Return them. Why do you have them? Is it not possible for us to have some of those conversations and start to push on some of those angles? Because we're waiting for them to say sorry for something that they've already told us, arrogantly, if anything, that they're not going to apologize because it is more trouble for them to apologize. But can we not say, all right then, hold on to that apology. Let's start chasing some of these things. Is that possible?
Okay, that could also be a way. But if you look at the norm here, it's very important sometimes, even beyond this compensation, the acceptance and the victim feeling that somebody felt that they wronged them. It's very important.
Okay.
But even getting to the complete, it's a process. It's not just something. There are challenges that we've had with even getting some of this information for reasons best known to the colonizers.
And I'm going back here. My problem with this conversation is it seems to be running ahead of itself. Okay? So you've mentioned here a number of times that you'd like the communities that were wronged would like to hear the apology directly from the king, so then they see what to do with that apology, whether to accept it or to tell him to his face, no, right? And then to say, this is what we want in return. Yes, you've apologized, but we want to know, what did you do with our Orkoyot? Yes, you've apologized, but we want to know where is Dedan Kimathi. Yes, you've apologized. We want to know where are our artifacts. Some of these things that were good, were crucial for us. They were religious items for us. But I'm not hearing that from the Kenya Human Rights Commission. If the Kenya Human Rights Commission were genuine in their demand and in this long letter, then the Kenya Human Rights Commission would be saying, this is what we've done. This is what we are working with the communities, and this. We are saying that the community that was wronged here is ready. The community here is ready, and they are seeking, their apology is specific. We are seeking an apology for what you did to Mekatilili Wamenza. We are seeking an apology for what you did to our Orkoyot. We are seeking an apology for what you did to our people by pushing them out of Laikipia and pushing them down. We are seeking. This is not what I'm hearing from you. You are not organizing anyone. You're just coming out to say we want an apology. It's like you're seeking publicity, Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Not really. That's not the position.
But
The issue here is that we are not supposed to occupy the space for the victims. We provide a platform for the victims to be heard. This apology, when made to the right people, it will provide a platform and a framework for some of these things to come out clearly. So it's not in our space to consolidate everything, but we will be able to facilitate that process at the right time. And we're already doing a lot. We are already doing a lot because you already know that we've worked closely with the Mau Mau, and there's been some significant gains. There are a number of people who have also reached out to us, and we are willing and are already providing support. So if you wanted all this captured in the letter, then I think that would be quite ambitious.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I just want you to say that, we've organized these communities and this and the other. This is what this community is seeking an apology for. You worked with the Mau Mau, like you've said, yes, right? Especially in the case that was taken to the UK, you are supporting the Mau Mau. When the British government, through their foreign secretary, went to Parliament and made this public acknowledgement and expression of deep regret for what happened, thereafter, there was an out-of-court settlement with this group of Mau Mau. The Kenya Human Rights Commission was working shoulder to shoulder with the Mau Mau then. So you accepted that a statement of expressing deep regret was good enough for that group of Mau Mau. Why would you expect that you would expect anything different? If you accepted deep regret, Kenya Human Rights Commission, then why are you seeking an apology today? What's changed?
Or is it because we've seen other countries like the Dutch? The Belgians also apologized. Their Prime Minister, Charles Michel, apologized for kidnapping mixed-race children during the colonial rule in Burundi, Congo, and Rwanda. But I'm sticking with the Dutch for a reason. This process, which now, when we got to 2022, it wasn't the end. In 2016, they have a minister who actually apologized and said, something? They didn't start this apology just... 2016 is when the first apology came. 2022 now, King, Prime Minister speaking. This year, this very year, the same king went further, apologized for slavery, and said, the Dutch involvement. They were marking 160 years since the slaves were freed in Belgium. He apologized and said, we are wrong. Don't skirt around it. So when we talk about an apology, are we talking about an apology for imperialism? Because imperialism is what brought about these problems. Are we saying, and are we looking at this thing deeply and saying, something? This legal issue that we're talking about, are we justifying imperialism and saying the colonizers had a right to brutalize, to harm people, to do what they did in the name of colonizing? Because was it legally accepted? There's a moral issue to it, but it appears that if you don't apologize, then you're saying there was nothing wrong with imperialism. So what you do is you apologize for specific acts. Those acts represent imperialism. That is what brought about that. So
let me ask you.
Ask me, please.
The example that you're giving us, the Dutch.
Yes.
How did we arrive at the king apologizing? Was it the people who were wronged who were demanding an apology, or was it the Dutch leadership feeling,
Okay.
It's the 21st century and we are more human than our predecessors. Let's apologize. Did they do it out of their own volition?
The demand had been there for some time, and there had been denials. Again, the reason why that research took place, because people figured, this is the official position. They were actually justifying imperialism and saying, there was a war, maybe there was some,
We needed to
misled people, we needed to contain. They were justifying it, and they were saying colonialism and its atrocities were justifiable by the laws. Then an institute decided, no, let's research this thing properly.
an institute of
And in Holland, a Dutch institute.
the Dutch.
Yes.
Not
and-
of the victims.
Nope.
Okay.
And they say, guys, you've got it wrong all along. This is the reality.
Okay.
And they confront the government and say, this is the reality.
How do we know this institute was not working for the government all along?
I have absolutely no idea.
All right. Did the victims place a list of demands and say, this is what we want? We want an apology, followed by this, followed by the other. Or did this institute do this research and then come out and say, you need to apologize and then you need to do this?
Research institutes tend to seek to answer a question.
Yes.
There are all these claims about atrocities that were committed by the Dutch, not just in Indonesia, but also in the Caribbean. Okay?
Yes.
Now, this is what they're saying, and it's historical. And we are a historical research institute. This is our history. Let's look into it. And they looked into it, and this is what they came up with. By the time their king was apologizing openly and saying, the other apology, let's leave that on the side. We've already apologized. But for slavery and our role in it, we are apologizing. Meaning, they are not just apologizing for one event. They are apologizing for imperialism and everything that went with it. And it is not a half-measured apology. They're saying, we apologize. Please, and even as utters the word, please forgive us.
Then who determines the reparation and the value of the reparation?
Now, that is usually a subject of discussion now. Okay, this is
It's
what
a
we'd
process.
like. This
It's a
is
process.
It's a process.
Yes, this is what we'd like. This is what we think would be adequate.
This is what we
You may make an offer, but they'll say we don't. Now, if you want to understand it, Macron, when you talk about the occupation of Algeria, they said, this apology, forget it, man. What we need to do, okay, we're not going to apologize. Because these apologies, sometimes they mix up things and they get things confused. No, we want to work into the future. How do you work into the future if you haven't sorted out the wrongs that were there? So, attitude change, views change. That's Macron's position.
The issue that I'm raising actually is on, if we just demand an apology and then let the person who's apologizing then determine the next steps.
We should be clear about what it is, the package we want in this
Yes.
apology.
When they went to Parliament after the pressure with the support of Kenya Human Rights Commission and the firm of Lady and the others, when they got the pressure, they went to Parliament and they said, we acknowledge, we deeply regret. And that opened the door for the British government to start negotiations out of court settlement with a group of Mau Mau.
Very true.
All right? They were running the program. And that's why I'm asking the Kenya Human Rights
They were
Commission.
controlling the narrative.
You accepted that. Why aren't you accepting that and then following it through
Why
with
do you
everybody
accept-
else?
you accepted
Why do you
regret.
want more? You already accepted the regret. Why are you saying the regret is not enough today?
Oh, of course, you must understand that it was an out-of-court settlement with a particular group, the Mau Mau. Were the Mau Mau the only people who were affected?
No, they were not.
Why are you locking out a room for an apology
And why-
to
but
other
why-
groups?
So, are we saying the opportunity of having the king visit is the opportunity that you've now seen as an appropriate time to bring this up? Has this thing been brewing? Have you been thinking, we need to? Because remember, this is the problem of having a huge empire like the British. The Indians have their own issues. There was one Prime Minister, Cameron, who tried and dodge. You know this? It's a thorny, touchy issue. And there's always the question of what next? Do you think the Dutch model of apology
Works.
or the German apology, do you think it is the way to go? Because clearly some of these colonizing nations don't think so.
I think this is a right opportunity, and the fact that the king has an opportunity to speak to the Kenyan people, not to Kenya Human Rights Commission, is an opportunity for him to speak to the victims and issue this apology. And if there are opportunities which are guided by the UN framework, so be it. There'll be mechanisms for reparations. So I don't think we're asking for too much. Neither are we seeking for publicity. We're just asking what is rightfully Kenyan. And the opportunity is here. What other opportunity? We can't go to the UK to go seek for this apology. The king has come. And we'll be speaking to other things as much as we are also seeking for this apology.
So there's a possibility of two things.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that this pressure that has come, the agitation, that over the next 4 days, there's a possibility that he will stand behind a microphone and say, I'm sorry. There's also a possibility that he will not. So what are we going to do if he says, or if he doesn't acknowledge?
That will
What happens thereafter?
That will not stop us from agitating for the UK government or the British rule to do the right thing. As you know, agitating for human rights is a continuous process. The opportunity has presented itself. It doesn't happen now. We still continue agitating and working with these communities in a way that ultimately will enable them to realize what is rightful. So I think this should be seen as a process. And even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't stop us, because after all, we've been in this for a very long time. And we've had gains and we've had challenges along the way.
Do you think that the colonizer also benefits from this apology?
Of course, it's part of a reconciliation, because it's, from a moral point of view, it's an acceptance, and it creates an opportunity for opening a new front of now working on the ills, to ensure that there are necessary legislative or legal frameworks or reforms that ensures that this is not repeated again. As you all know, even after the colonization period, we still have some elements of things that are happening in this country that shows that these things are being repeated in different forms. Yeah.
So if we take this to present-day Kenya, then, if we feel that we've had successive governments who have misruled us, should they also apologize to us?
They should. And I think when you remember the statement by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, he did allude that there's a fair share of responsibility on the part of the Kenyan government, which he did apologize. And the same thing also happened with the CJ Mutunga. Yeah.
What's the next course of action? So the king is here. You issued a statement before his arrival, and he said, this is what we want. We'd like this from the king. Are you seeking to have your letter delivered to him? Are you seeking audience with him? Or was that publicity, just the publicity, enough to raise the awareness and to send a message to him? And then once he leaves on Friday, what next?
You know, one of the recommendations is that we are open to a possible discussion, but more importantly, to avail an opportunity for the victims. This is something that we can work through to ensure that the victims get a space. So for us, it was not about us and the king. It was about the victims and affording them an opportunity to engage in a balanced space whereby they can also express their grievances and get these apologies and whatever comes with it.
Is there one repository of information where we know these are the victims of the atrocities and these are the injustices that are committed?
Of course, we've listed them. As I did indicate when we started here, is that there are several things. We are talking about the political repressions during the colonial rule. We are talking about the land alienation. We are talking about the gross human rights violation committed by the British corporates. And even you still see them happening in a number of corporates owned by the British. And we feel this is another form of neocolonialism, because there are several atrocities that are being committed in the so-called conservancies, in the so-called British corporates, when you look at the issues around the mountain and many other things. So
Cornelius,
there are all list of things that we are seeking apologies for.
Cornelius, thank you very much for joining us today. Cornelius Oduor is the Deputy Executive Director at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. 9 a.m., time for the news.
Spice.